Hello everybody, welcome to Spiritual Metaphysics 101. My name is Jerry Yakov and I'm your host. I'm also a teacher and student of Spiritual Metaphysics, which is the title of this show. Spiritual Metaphysics really means a shift in perception. It accounts for a shift, if you will, from fear to love. And that's what we've named this particular episode, a shift in perception. You might have seen bumper stickers occasionally on cars. It says, shifts happen. And I know that that comes from religious science churches. They put out that particular bumper sticker. Now, what does it mean that shifts happen, or shifts in perception, and why are they important metaphysically? Well, it's because it centers on our minds. Our minds have one of two thought systems that they can align with. The thought system of the ego, which is fear-based, or the thought system of the spirit, which is love-based. And we are the decision makers. We're the ones that decide between the fear and the ego, or the love and the spirit. And as we make that decision from fear to love, we shift our perception and we see everything consistent with the choice that we've made. And the importance of choice cannot be overstated. Before I got into a spiritual journey, and maybe this is true for you all as well, I didn't know I had a choice. All I knew was that I was steeped in fear and trying in some way to construct my life so that I could overcome the fear. And I may not have even been conscious of that. I was simply experiencing life fearfully. Well, now I know metaphysically, and through a spiritual path called A Course in Miracles. Here's a copy of the book. And it's my spiritual path. And we'll be discussing some of the text in A Course in Miracles, along with some other resources that I've been reading lately. So A Course in Miracles makes this distinction very clear, that the ego always speaks first to us. We're so habitually attuned to that thought system that we see things through the perceptive eyes of fear. And we can choose again. And when we choose again, we make the choice for the spirit. In contrast with the fear, we then perceive things lovingly and kindly and compassionately. And that's so important, because as we forgive others, which is also an attribute of the loving kindness of the Spirit, as we see things forgivingly, we then know that we're forgiven. And that's important because we're always basically forgiving ourselves. Everything is a projection. We see things consistent with our own beliefs about ourselves. So if I forgive a brother and extend God's love to him or her, I'm also forgiving myself. And I'm aligned with God's powerful, light-filled forgiveness that's always available to me. So through the giving, I know that I have it. And I couldn't give it unless I know I have it. And so there's this circle, if you will, or a unity that's established, where the giving comes back, and so on and so forth. So it's a reciprocity or a collaborative effort. Everybody that's on my perceptive field, and I heard this today, is either doing things to me, or if I see it with love and my shift in perception has occurred, they're doing things for me. Instead of they're doing it to me, fear-based, they're doing it for me, love-based, because I can see that they're asking for forgiveness, and so am I. And they're asking for love, and so am I. So this is the interesting shifts happen, if you will. And I just want to read something briefly from the text in A Course in Miracles. This is in a text section called The Basis of the Dream. And here the Course states that does not a world that seems quite real arise in dreams? Well, here are the references to our perceptive experience. It's basically, as the Course calls it, an illusion or a dream. Why? Because it's a projected image of my beliefs and your beliefs. So it doesn't exist out there until I have a belief system based in the ego, and I project guilt and sin on other people and feel that they are frightening to me. But I don't want to look at those frightening aspects of my own personality and my own mind and my own shortcomings and defects of character. I push them out into the world, and projection makes perception. That's why I see it, because I've projected it. So doesn't the world seem quite real that arises in dreams? This is the state of our affairs in the world and in the body. Yet, think what this world is. It is clearly not the world you saw before you slept. This is a reference to the fall from grace in the Garden of Eden story. We had perfect vision in heaven, and we knew we were one with love, and all was perfect, and all was holy, and there was a unanimity. Then when we, the apple, the tree of good and evil, and right and wrong was eaten, this dualistic version of a world, the illusion, the dream, then seemed to invade our consciousness, and a veil of forgetfulness fell over our eyes, so that all we see is this dim dream-like experience in the perceptive world of the bodies. Separate, dualistic, fear-based, birth, and then death. And so this is a fearful scenario, and we've attributed that to God as his punishment for our disobeying him. Well, I don't think that's actually true. I think that that was done to ourselves out of a sense of guilt that we seemingly disobeyed God's will of love. So we're punishing ourselves, and we're projecting a dreamlike experience. And it is a distortion of the world that we planned solely around what we thought we would prefer. In other words, we'll hide in the bushes in our world and in our perceptive experience of a dream, and God can't find us. And all these defenses are put up to keep God's love and his forgiveness away from us. Now, this is done on a very subconscious level. Nonetheless, that's the situation. Because if these defenses were surrendered and the shift happened so that we gave up the fear and aligned with the love, we would no longer see our brothers as sinful. We would know that they are fully innocent and guiltless, as are we. And then you move up this ladder of atonement that the Course talks about to the extent that you fully awaken, and this veil of forgetfulness is lifted from your eyes, and you're fully aware then of being in heaven, where you've never left, only dreaming of exile and dreaming of the perceptive world. Well, that's a whole overview, and there's a lot there, I recognize, but I wanted to introduce the idea of a dream. And within the dream, there is a shift in perception that's possible, which then leads to an awakening. And this is what the Buddhists and the Hindus and the Eastern philosophies and theologies talk about, awakening from Maya, or the illusion. So, having done a little introductory expression through A Course in Miracles, we'll go on now to another resource that I've been reading lately, and we'll continue in this vein of shifting our perception from fear to love. So I have another book that I've been reading lately, or rereading, and it's called Emmanuel's Book. Here's a copy of Emmanuel's book. And all these resources, I discussed A Course in Miracles at the top of this episode, and now Emmanuel's book. These are all available online. I buy my books used on Amazon, but you can certainly buy them new, or you can look for them in bookstores, usually in the self-help section of bookstores. So Emmanuel's book is compiled by Pat Rodegast, and there's an introduction by Ram Dass. And many of you are familiar with Ram Dass, who is really a wonderful mystic from the West. And what he says as an introduction to this book, Emmanuel's book, he says, being with Emmanuel, one comes to appreciate the vast evolutionary context in which our lives are being lived. And at each moment we are at just the right place in the journey. As Emmanuel points out, quote, who you are is a necessary step to being who you will be, end of quote. So going on with our topic of shifts in perception, here's a question that's posed in the book: why are we here? And I made reference to here being the dream. where the veil of forgetfulness falls over our eyes and we see things through ego, fear-based distortions. So the answer to why we are here in the book, Emmanuel's book, because in the process of the soul's evolution towards oneness again, you have stopped at this level of consciousness to remember who you are. Ask yourselves often in your lives, what have I forgotten? The reference to the veil of forgetfulness over our eyes. What have I forgotten? When you're in pain, ask, what is it that I don't remember? When you feel lost, ask, where have I put my real identity? It is a necessary step. It is a great and glorious schoolroom, and it is necessary where your consciousness belongs. If it did not, you would not be here, meaning in the world and in a body. And he says, going on, this is a schoolroom of illusion. Well, we talked about Maya and the projected images from our own beliefs that are ego-based and fearful. And so what do we see but sinful, guilty people who pose a threat to us, and we're afraid. Never remembering that we originated those thoughts and those beliefs, and so we have branded people with sin and guilt and become paranoid of our own thoughts and our own unhealed minds and our own split minds. Emmanuel goes on, this is a schoolroom of illusion. Do not give permanent reality to temporary things. Well, when you have a shift in perception, these temporary, fearful, projected images go by the way. And there's a shift in perception consistent with our shift and decision internally in our minds to align with the spirit and the love rather than the ego and the fear. He says, once you have learned what you came to learn, the illusion or the dream can be left. When you leave your text behind, again back to the metaphor of a schoolroom, see that it is in excellent condition as possible for the next class to use. Knowing the purpose of that illusion lends it respect. It is all very tidy in the end. Well, this is so wonderful because what Emmanuel is suggesting is that we take a middle road. We don't discard our experience in the world in the body because it's an illusion or a dream. We use it constructively, or as he says here, you know, once you've learned what you came to learn, then the illusion can be left. But you don't dismiss the illusion out of hand before your consciousness is being raised sufficiently where you then have an enlightened experience. While you're unenlightened, and I would say 99.99% of us are in that category, what you have to do in this middle way is use the schoolroom of illusion and learn from it so that you can awaken to true reality, and then the illusion disappears. So we don't give permanent reality to temporary illusions, but we use them with a different purpose. And that purpose is to remind us when I'm afraid, when I'm angry, when I'm judgmental, to go and choose again within my mind the spirit rather than the ego, and ask the spirit to guide me to be forgiving and loving. It's as simple as that. So the formula is always the same. The mechanism is always the same, but it's a middle way. I experience things in the dream which prompt me then to go back within my mind at another level entirely from the dream and ask for guidance through the spirit which is loving and forgiving. Then I go back into my perceptive shifting in the world and see people, places, and things with forgiveness and love. And that's what we do. And that is the middle way, which the Buddhists talk about as well. The Buddhists are very clear about this, dear friends. What they say is when you meditate, and we'll get into this, I think, a little bit in the next portion of this episode. When you meditate, you're stopping the chattering in the mind, which is ego, fear-based chattering, and projected images that frighten you, forgetting again that they originated with our own beliefs. I love the acronym for fear, F-E-A-R, which our friends in 12-step use, and that's false evidence appearing real. It isn't true. And as Emmanuel says, do not give permanent reality to temporary things. It's promised that as we awaken, the dream becomes a happy dream. Before we awaken or we engage in this journey, the dream is frightening. It's terrifying. It is a nightmare. So those of you that are at a place in your life where you're ready to say, there must be another way. What is the other way? How can I shift my perception? You're ready for the teacher. And as the adage says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So I love Emmanuel's book. Let me just read a little bit more from this particular chapter. He says, as the desire to turn to the light increases, the soul knows where the resistance still rests and takes the responsibility for the exploration of that resistance. Divine laws protect those of lesser awareness from being given more choice, more responsibility than they are able to handle. The laws of likeness place the human physically manifested reality in a compatible level of consciousness. Well, here Emmanuel is really saying the same thing in a little different way. Your beliefs projected out present you with your life experience. So as you shift your beliefs and as you shift your perception, then the experiential dream and the figures in the dream and the scenery in the dream and the script of the dream will shift coincidentally with the shift in your mind. There's another adage that I like, and that's seek not to change the world, but seek to change your thinking and your mind about the world. And then, of course, what you perceive is different, and it's consistent with love, and it becomes a happier dream. Well, then he goes on, and let's conclude with this. One does not go from first grade into graduate school, but by degrees. As consciousness explores and creates itself, it moves slowly up the staircase of awareness. It is not that one who is in deep darkness and ignorance suddenly plunges into brilliant light and total responsibility as they lift from the physical body. That would go against the divine contract of consciousness, creating its own reality. Well, this, I think, underscores the loving guidance that we get from Spirit. Because Spirit, as any loving parent, would not give lessons to a child beyond that which they're capable of grasping. It would be too terrifying. So it's a process. And in that process, we do awaken slowly, and the experience in the world is of a happier dream. But it's based on shifting perception, not changing the scenario and the landscape in the world. So moving right along with our discussion of shifts in consciousness, I have another resource that I want to point out, and that's from the Self-Realization Fellowship. This is their, I believe it's a quarterly magazine that they put out, and this is the fall 2012 edition of Self-Realization magazine. And I will be reading from an article by the president of the Self-Realization Fellowship, and that is Sri Mrinalina Mata, M-A-T-A. And she's a wonderful nun in the Self-Realization Fellowship who says in her article, meditation is the greatest way to free the soul. And she goes on to say, you can free the soul from ignorance and from all that binds it to mortal consciousness. Realize the ultimate truth. Quote, I am not this body, I am the soul, one with infinite spirit. All right, let's go on a little further. And consistent with our topic of shifts in perception, she has a section in her article called Even a Brief Glimpse of Divine Consciousness Transforms One's Life. And she reads, she states in part, instead of being identified with physical forms and limitations, attachments and desires, likes and dislikes, joys and sorrows. You see all of life as an expression of God. When you have a shift in perception and your consciousness is raised, you see all of life as an expression of God. Again, consistent with the middle way. You see things that are frightening, you go within, either in meditation or in contemplation or in divine decision, and you turn to the Spirit. And then you see all of life as an expression of God. And then she says that infinite love is of the divine. So then she goes on, learn to anchor your consciousness in that, and T is capitalized in the word that which is changeless, which would be the Spirit. Let the consciousness always be centered on that one reality. And again, the reality is capitalized, because that would be the state of mind, the right-mindedness of the divine state, the Spirit, divine consciousness, rather than ego, body consciousness. And then she concludes that paragraph, God and your relationship with Him is the focus. Well, let's go on a little bit further, and this is exactly on point with what we had been discussing. Her title of this section is, Do Not Let Maya Go On Tricking You. If you remember, we referenced Maya as the dream or the illusion, the projected image from our ego minds. So she says, if there is one thought, one message that I most want to leave with you, it would be those words of the Guru Paramahansa Yogananda, to shake you as he sought to shake us. She was a student of Paramahansa Yogananda, to shake us out of our spiritual slothfulness into a greater desire for God, a greater effort to meditate deeply and to follow the ways that have been pointed out to us by our blessed Guru and line of gurus. These teachings do lead to that divine goal. And the divine goal is a shift in consciousness over and over and over as a discipline, as a devotee to your spiritual journey until you awaken from the dream and you are fully conscious and you are enlightened. Well, she goes on to say, don't let delusion or Maya or Satan go on tricking you into being bound and limited to the little experiences of this human body, to physical, temporal desires and objects. Give some time to God. When you first awaken during your day, give time to God. The last thing at night, meditate and let your consciousness rest in Him, in God. And then she says, even if you give an hour of the day to God in deep meditation, making sincere efforts, you will see how your life changes. Well, again, here's the middle way. The life will change. The dream will become a happy dream. But the purpose is to awaken fully from the dream so that we no longer experience the ego identity and the ego body and the self with the small s. And we know ourselves with a capital S as one in the Christ, one in the Buddha, one in the Krishna and the Tao. Well, she goes on, even if it's just for 1 minute or 3 minutes, sit down and meditate, or just turn the consciousness within and let the thoughts rest on God. In those few moments, feel such devotion, such love and longing for God that the whole world recedes, and you know that the only reality is He. Well, here she's saying the whole world recedes. It's a shift in perception. And I think at the outset, the world recedes from a frightening perceptive experience to an experience of people, places, and things calling for your love, calling for your compassion, calling for your kindness and forgiveness. And you no longer harbor the resentments and the grievances. It's replaced with the miracle of a shift in perception. She says the only real relationship is the relationship of your soul and spirit. The oneness of your soul and your whole being with God. And then she says, carry out your responsibilities in this world. Well, we're to do this in the middle way. We don't, withdraw ourselves, to the extent where we're sitting in a cave and isolating and simply meditating 24 hours a day. We live a normal life. We, as she says here, we carry out our responsibilities in this world. God does not intend that you neglect those, and you do not have to neglect them. You will find that as you come closer to God, you become a more perfected and balanced human being. You can love others more purely, and your relationships with others begin to improve. Whatever conditions you're faced with in life, you can reach an unclouded perspective, that shift in perception, and see how to guide your life through these labyrinths of experiences. The schoolroom, the classroom. God will show you the way. And you begin to remove your consciousness from the debris of all those limiting ego thoughts. And your duty in the world to family and to humankind and to God all begin to fall into proper perspective. Well, I wish we had more time, but the time is going quite quickly. I love this topic of shifts in perception. I think it goes to the heart of what the spiritual journey is all about. And needless to say, the spiritual journey is nothing without the divine spirit guiding us. We got into the problem, and we must look to the solution, and that would be with the teacher. And the teacher can be Jesus, the teacher can be Buddha, the teacher can be Krishna, Allah, the higher power, God of your understanding. But the main thing is that we know that we're surrendering all of our mistaken thoughts to that higher power and saying, I step back and I let you lead the way. And the shifts of perception then lead to a full awakening in the spirit. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. I notice that I gather steam as I talk about this because it is so empowering. These thoughts, these theologies, these philosophies, these truths, if you will, with a capital T, are universal. And just the teaching of it and the expression of them lifts us up in consciousness so that we know love, understanding, peace, and joy. And I wish that for you every day and every moment. We are as God created us. Namaste, shalom, and peace. And thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
¿Qué tal?